Absolutely. Normally, in the church here, normally when we preach, I think this is true of both Davey and I, the type of preaching we do is what I call textual. Some people historically would have called it expository, but that's another life as to why. I'll tell you it's not the best description. But textual means we take a passage and we sit in the passage and we explore it. And we don't move far from the passage. And the reason we do that is it's a basic form of preaching that and the way in which people preach are actually it's the way they should preach, but that's another world of a different life and a different argument as well. Today I'm going to do something more thematic, where we take a number of passages and sit on a theme that is raised by these different passages. And so we're not going to be finishing today the series in Mark. I'll finish it next week from Mark chapter 15. I changed my mind on Thursday, and so I'm doing something slightly different. So there are 3 readings. They're all coming from Mark. They're all readings that we've heard before as we have looked at Mark's Gospel. The first of them comes from Mark chapter 2, verses 13 to 17. And this is what we read there. Mark chapter 2, verses 13 to 17. Once again, Jesus went out beside the lake. A large crowd came to him, and he began to teach them. As he walked along, he saw Levi, son of Alphaeus, sitting at the tax collector's booth. "Follow me," Jesus told him, and Levi got up and followed him. While Jesus was having dinner at Levi's house, many tax collectors and sinners were eating with him and his disciples, for there were many who followed him. When the teachers of the law, who were Pharisees, saw him eating with the sinners and tax collectors, they asked his disciples, "Why does he eat with tax collectors and sinners?" On hearing this, Jesus said to them, "It's not the healthy who need a doctor, but those who are ill. I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners." The next reading comes from Mark chapter 7, verses 24 and following. I preached on this a few weeks ago. It's a stunning passage in Mark's Gospel. I may have said before, but I remember the late John Smith, Australian biker and evangelist, preaching from the Gospel of Mark. And he says, "How can we make this stuff boring?" Oh, we manage. Mark chapter 7, verse 24. Jesus left that place and went to the vicinity of Tyre. He entered a house and did not want anyone to know it, yet he could not keep his presence secret. In fact, as soon as she heard about him, a woman whose little daughter was possessed by an impure spirit came and fell at his feet. The woman was a Greek born in Syrian Phoenicia. She begged Jesus to drive the demon out of her daughter. "First, let the children eat all they want," he told her, "for it's not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs." "Lord," she replied, "even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs." Then he told her, "For such a reply, you may go. The demon has left your daughter." She went home and found her child lying in the bed and the demon gone. Final reading comes from last week's sermon, and we're looking at Mark chapter 14. And I'm just reading a couple of verses from there, verse 22. 14, verse 22, while they were eating, Jesus took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take it, this is my body." Then he took a cup, and when he had given thanks for it, he gave it to them, and they all drank from it. "This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many," he said to them. "Truly I tell you, I will not drink again from the fruit of the vine until the day when I drink it anew in the kingdom of God." Go for the first slide. Yep. Thank you. I'm sure it'll work from then on. Since we came back from Canada, and I've lived in Scotland, and I've lived over on the south side of Glasgow several times with my family, I have gone to the Indian restaurant in Skirving Street. As I've sat at the table with my vegetable pakora, prawn puri, where are you, David? Chicken tikka masala, and my peshwari naan, I've often thought to myself, I wonder what it was like. I wonder what it was like when it was the Albert Hall. The Albert Hall being the first incarnation of this congregation, which today we call Old House Community Church. I wondered if they used the Believer's Hymn Book. Yeah. I wondered where the little platform was. I wondered was there a pulpit? I wondered what it sounded like and looked like. I wondered where the little room was at the back, that at times there were far too many people crammed into it. I wondered, Stuart, where the really poor toilet was in the building. I wondered all of these other questions about it. Oh, by the way, it was called the Albert Hall not because a leader was called Albert, which was what I thought at first, but because I believe it started in a flat in Albert Road. Okay, this is the information at least I'm provided with up until this point. But then, as I sit there at my table eating my selection of food, I sometimes ask myself another question, and the question is, just put it on the blank slide, will you? I'm not quite sure what it's doing. Another question that I ask myself is, what would have happened if the congregation hadn't moved? Now, people today, many of us, often look and we lament when we see churches or buildings that were used for churches that are now turned into restaurants or performance events, or they are turned into pubs, or they're turned into variety halls or whatever. We look and we lament that a building that was used for a church now becomes something else. In the town where we lived in Canada, the town of Wolfville, the nicest building in the main street, there wasn't a lot of a main street, but the nicest building in the main street was called the Church Brewing Company. And it was called the Church Brewing Company because it had been a United Church of Canada that had been sold and turned into a restaurant and a local brewery. And some people in the town were so mad that the church had sold it to a brewery that they wouldn't go to the restaurant. Restaurant people didn't care because all the people from Halifax travelled to Wolfville to go to the Church Brewing Company because it was a really pretty quirky place to go and eat. But here's the thing, the reason the United Church of Canada in that town closed was because they refused to move in so many ways. And the reason now there's a restaurant in Skirving Street is because this congregation here decided to move. They decided to move because they realized the building was no longer fit for purpose. They decided to move because they realized that it had no chance of attracting young children and families to it. They decided to move because they felt that it was important that they would go somewhere where there was more of a community, that they could be part of the community and reach that community. This move was not easy. This move involved sacrifice, prayer, faith, and commitment from ordinary people. There were people who said it couldn't be done. Yet they found a piece of land in which we now sit. This old Albert Hall, I think 1989. The congregation met in the old Tinto Primary School that used to be in Tinto Road. I looked for a picture, but apparently it burnt down. Nothing to do with the congregation here. So they would meet in the old Tinto Primary School, and there they worshipped and prayed at the same time as they built a building on this land. How did they manage to build this place in which we sit today? They built it through prayer and faith and sacrifice and a whole range of fundraising activities, prayer breakfasts, frugal lunches, concerts, ceilidhs, silent auctions, funding applications, letters to friends, individual giving campaigns, community outreach events. But more than that, they physically turned up on site here and helped build the flipping thing in order to save money. In the back corridor, if you've never been there, you can see the stages of the development of the building, which opened in 1994, renamed now Nether Old House evangelical church. And those who lived through that period, and some of you are in the room, and some of you are teaching our kids in our kids' church at the moment, talk about faith. They talk about how these activities pulled the congregation together, and they talk about how God was faithful to them and helped them achieve their goal. But in sharing a little bit about the history of the church, I don't want to be like the person at a funeral who gives a eulogy. And they talk about the person, and you wonder if you've turned up at the right funeral. You check the bulletin. Well, I'm in the right place. It's okay. There's been hard times in the life of this congregation. And here I will tread with great care. There has been a very painful time in the life of this congregation that has left its mark and its hurt and its pain on people. But in this room today, there are people who led that congregation through that pain, re-established it, refocused it, and once more got it up and running. Show us that picture. That picture, if you would, Paul, thanks very much. The date of that, remind me the date, 2012. This is 2012. Carol concert, community carol concert, after a really difficult period in the life of the church, being held in the now new or existing Tinto Primary School next door. And it was one of the signs of hope and growth after a congregation had moved through a very, very difficult period, helped and led by some of the people who are in this room today. And I think it was in 2014, I could be wrong in this one, that the church was renamed Old House Community Church. So when we gather in here today, on these seats in this building, we give thanks to you, and we give thanks to God, and celebrate his faithfulness to this congregation, and celebrate your faithfulness and your courage and your willingness to move when people said it couldn't be done. We celebrate what God has done with this church. Can you go to the next slide? But today we have a problem, or let's call it a challenge. Most Sundays, this building is beyond 80% capacity. It's not merely 80% capacity for those of us who are adults sitting in the room, but it's beyond comfortable capacity for the work that we're trying to do with the children. And part is your fault, because you prayed that God would send you families and children, and God has answered that prayer. And so we sit in here with this challenge. And the challenge is, if we're like that jar there, and we want more people to come in, we're going to have to decide who we want to lose. We don't want to lose you. And our challenge is that when a congregation reaches 80% capacity, it is very, very difficult for us to attract and to grow any bigger. It's just hard to do that with a demographic such as ours. It's a very difficult thing to do. And this is why other churches, whether it's Home Church, have to multiply their services, or Rehope have to multiply their services, or Newton Mearns, who are considering running a second services, churches have to act, because they desire to create a space where more people will be able to come. Who are these people, you ask? Well, there are people who I hope live in the south side of Glasgow who are looking for a safe place to belong. Who are these people that might want to come here? There are people who might want to look for a church that wants to offer a non-judgmental welcome to people. There are people who might want to come to a church that actually has contemporary worship and, I hope, progressive and thoughtful preaching. There are people who might want to come to a church where they can get a welcome. These are the people we're talking about. There are people in the community who we do not yet know, who we hope will come to faith in the person of Jesus Christ. But we are at 80% capacity, and therefore it is going to be very, very difficult for us to welcome, to accommodate, and to keep new people. That is our challenge. I know it's not all about what happens on a Sunday. I know that there are many other activities that should take place during the week, but I know of no congregation that can sustain activities during the week that does not have a strong centre. So although a church is most certainly not all about what happens on a Sunday, what happens on a Sunday really matters. And I've said this before, but the way what I see happens on a Sunday, the way in which I understand it, is that we, in some senses, gather at a table. And Jesus is at the head of that table. And we gather together around that table. We're all invited to the table because it's Jesus' table. And we gather around the table because we're willing to allow Jesus to change us and to challenge us into his likeness. We gather to find out what it means to follow him individually and faithfully. The table is a table of welcome. This place should be a place of welcome, but it's also a place of challenge because in our first reading, Jesus says to people, "Come, follow me." The table at which we gather is a table that I hope will indeed comfort those of you who are troubled and will also trouble those of you who are comfortable. The table at which we meet is the table at which Jesus is Lord. But however we find ourselves here, however we come to this table, it should be a place of humanity, of help, of hospitality and healing. And that is what it means to gather in a community and to gather in a church. And we have reached 80% capacity and we're going to struggle to welcome more people in. Therefore, our goal, we're going to make more room at the table. Over the last few months, indeed almost years almost now, leaders and trustees, we've met, we've prayed, we've talked about what we think should be the best option. We've spoken, we've consulted, and therefore we have decided that we plan from September onwards to hold our all-age, when we're all together with our kids, we're going to plan to hold our all-age together worship part in Tinto Primary School. We will retain this building for our kids' work and for our cafe time, and yes, that will mean movement between the two buildings that we are going to have to manage. However, this move will give us the chance to both see whether we can grow the congregation as a whole and also that we can create a much better and bigger and wider space for our kids' church. We are doing this for no other motive than to make more space at the table. This move will also allow us to focus our attention and reaching out to our wider community and inviting them to come and be part of us and trying to work out what it means for us to be a good community church, not from our perspective, but from their perspective. This is not a church growth strategy. It's a church grace strategy. For as the Syrophoenician woman argued, even the dogs are entitled to get crumbs from under the table. The table is a table of grace. The table is a table of love. The table is a table of hope. The table is a table of welcome. There is mercy at this table. There is love at this table. There is welcome at this table. And we want to make more room at the table. That's a vision, to make more room at the table. But with any vision, there is a cost. There will be a financial cost. We can talk about that. Spoken about it on Wednesday night. But the biggest cost is going to be in terms of time and effort and prayer and goodwill and faith. Those involved in earlier moves have spoken about faith and God's faithfulness. But I'm now going to say something. We cannot achieve the vision for tomorrow on the faith of yesterday. Like the manna provided to the Old Testament people, it is gone. We have to rely on the prayers and faith of today and the provision of God for faith and tomorrow. It is now our opportunity to climb out of the boat. Call to action. Pray for this move throughout the summer. If we have informal gatherings or formal gatherings, if you can, join us. Approach the move with faith. Adrian, maybe the faith indeed that big, yeah? That we really need to do something quite radical here to accommodate everybody if and when we come back from the school. That kind of faith? Yeah, let's try for that. Help us practically. So in a sense, the success of this will not really be dependent upon more giving, except of time and effort. Help us practically. We're going to need a stewarding team to make this work that will welcome people. We'll need to extend our welcome team. We're going to need to enhance our technical team, our sound and AV. We're going to have to have people help us deliver leaflets into our community. And critically, we're going to need to have a set-up team that will help us and will gather and will help set up the stage in the school and help take the stuff down. We don't exactly yet know and all the stuff that is going to be moved, but we're going to need that to happen. We're going to need it to happen for about 40 weeks of a year, and we're going to need it to happen in November when it's going to be pouring with rain and snowing, and we're going to need it to happen when we're all tired and fed up with it, but we're going to need it to happen because the goal of all this is to make more room at the table so that people can find the person of Jesus Christ and be part of this place here. Let me throw this in, nearly done. They say that there's joy in giving. It's not always true. But they say there is joy when you give and you serve with a group of people and you can see the goals and the outcome. And they say that that is a source of deep joy, and that's what we're inviting you to participate in. If you want to be an early adopter, speak to me. Tell me you're willing to help. Send me a message. Email me. Phone me. Tell me you might not even know what it is you want to do, but you want to be part of it. Because if we need to move the stuff ourselves, we will be in the school in September. But if this congregation is going to embrace it, and we're going to survive beyond September, you are going to have to live in to the vision. Some of you are thinking, go back and doing the textual sermons, they're better, mate. I think so too. On Wednesday night, I asked the congregation to share some things they thought that God might be saying. This is what people said. We need commitment. We need to be gentle with one another. But somebody else said this. Sometimes we will need to learn to fly through the clouds to see the beauty of the sky and the sunset above. A couple of weeks ago, told a story. Once upon a time, a family of ducks waddled into a church. They were told that they could fly. They shouted, "We could fly." Then they waddled home. The sad thing was they really could fly. As I sat at my table in Skirving Street with my vegetable pakora, my prawn puri, chicken tikka masala and peshwari naan, I asked myself, what if the congregation had never moved? But they did. And they flew. Ask them, was it easy? No. Was it straightforward? No. Was it risky? Yeah. But they flew. And now, they invite us to join them. That's the vision of where we're going. And I'm inviting you to join us.